Wow, this is as I sat down, I realized it's kind of like when you go to Fenway Park and they have that one pillar that's in the outfield and you can only see a quarter of the field. All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Drew Trojanowski. I'm the CEO of the Southwest Mission Acceleration Center. I appreciate the opportunity from Jessica, from Brett, from everybody else, and for the opportunity to be part of the panel that's specifically around securing space and enhancing cyber resilience and space operations. So I want to take the opportunity to give each one of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, just with brevity, if you guys don't mind, just kind of your name, your background, and your interest in the space portfolio.
Yeah, so I can go first. Hi, my name's John Wiltberger. I work for a company called the MITRE Corporation. We're a federally funded research and development center out of the DC area. I should probably say that anything that I say up here is of my own personal opinion and not MITRE's specific opinion. With that, a lot of the work that I do is in cybersecurity, specifically with critical infrastructure. I'm a previous intelligence person, but the past 5 years or so, I've been working in the space sector. I got the amazing opportunity to go to an Arizona university, Embry Riddle Aeronautical University, to do their Masters of Space Operations with Dr. Andrew Aldrin, fantastic professor. Embry Riddle is amazing, and also got the opportunity to learn really how cybersecurity fits in with the overall space architecture and operation system. So it's been wonderful. And I thank you for having me today.
Hi, I'm Megan Fitzgerald, and leading off of John's introduction of how great Embry Riddle is, I work for Embry Riddle, and I'm an alumni of Embry Riddle, so I appreciate that hype. My background is in national security operations and cyber intelligence. I work with now a lot of government entities and private entities to do national security and cyber operations and give them the advice that Embry Riddle has given me. So currently I'm the Senior Director of our government and external operations at Embry Riddle for all things to make sure that we're working with all of the private and public sector entities that are trying to work through these issues and going through both the nitty-gritty as well as the making them successful at a larger policy 3,000-foot level. So happy to be here, excited to be here.
I'm Justin Chandler. I'm the Vice President at ThinkOrbital. So we're a small space startup really focused on space domain awareness, specifically in X-ray capability on orbit up to 10 kilometers away. So if Russia puts something up and we really want to know what's inside because we have no other capability, that's what we're focused on. So it's been really exciting. I'm also an advisor with Astroforge, so I get to talk to Matt and hear all of his jokes on a daily basis, so that's a lot of fun. And then I'm also on the advisory board with Interplanetary, so get to talk to Jessica a lot, which is great. Prior to that, I did a little over 21 years active duty Air Force and Space Force. Unique time in history, got to be part of the initial stand-up of the first service since 1947, so what a fascinating time in our history, and spending those days in the Pentagon. Learned a lot, and so cyber is near and dear to my heart. So excited to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Hello, here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Bell. I am an assistant professor at ASU, Arizona State University. My background is cybersecurity and mostly from a hacker's perspective. I am part of the ASU team that actually hosted DEF CON CTF from 2018 to 2021. So 4 years in a row. And during that time, I also managed to pregnant for one time and then, give birth to not only host the organization, but also host the competition, but also have some special gift for myself, which is a pretty awesome experience. 3 weeks before my due, I was working on challenges, organizing the competition. It's a fun experience. And right now, we are performing, a bunch of DoD programs. I have been serving for more than 5 DoD programs, including Army, ARO, NNR, NSA, and also DARPA. And actually, I just came back this morning from a DARPA program, which focuses on, we call it cyber physical vulnerabilities for cyber physical systems. So a lot of interesting things that I'd like to share with you guys in terms of interesting failure that you can come across for a cyber physical system, such as a rover, something that you might be interested in space.
Thank you. Thank you for the introductions. On that note, I figured I would start off, I guess a little bit spicier. In the era of Doge, and in the era of the current administration's desire to, reduce the amount of regulatory burden that exists, that's going to create a lot of complications. And so how might this reduction in regulations implement the development and implementation of cybersecurity standards for space operations, and what role should private industry play with self-regulation?
As a small space company, any reduction in regulations is universally applauded. What I found moving from the government to industry is how difficult the government makes it to work with government. Even having been in the government, I thought I understood it, and I had no idea. So I think at the surface level, I'm supportive of those efforts. The problem is, we have a lot of adversarial nations, non-state actors, individuals that wish to undermine the progress that we're all here to celebrate and move forward. So, there's a balance. And so trying to move fast, you have to take some risk, but you want to make sure you're taking smart risk, acknowledged risk, not risk that you didn't anticipate or you're moving so fast that it just happened. I think that's a dangerous place to be. And what we're all trying to accomplish and what we're all part of is too important for our future as a nation, our future as humankind in general, and this great future that we all see beyond this planet. So it's really a balancing act. And for a small company, even though we're doing things that are very important to national security, being able to put resources to focus on cybersecurity and safeguard that information, that's a huge tax on our limited resources. So trying to figure out how you can do that at the same time as pursuing the main mission of the company is a critical challenge, and something that I don't have the answer for, but I know that it's something we try to, everyone that comes on board with the team is well versed on how important that mission is, safeguarding information, being careful with data spillage, and where you talk about things and how you store your information is really valuable.
Yeah, so being somebody who works directly with the federal government and regulations, I actually find it incredibly interesting how, as we lose those sorts of potential resources of guidance or standards, it's made up a lot more in private sector. So when it comes to specifically cybersecurity and cyber-related intel for nation-state actors, you already have a plethora of amazing reporting and amazing guidance coming out of the private sector. So if you're familiar with companies like Dragos or Mandiant, or Microsoft has a lot of those things that come out also, those are very in-depth, well-written reports, well-written guidance that are targeted at different industries. And a lot of these things that at least I have found personally in my experience has been that it's very difficult to write a regulation that is broadly applied correctly in an industry. It's better to give this amazing buzzword that I despise, cyber hygiene, to a specific sector and say, these are the things that you should be looking for. Now, however you can apply it while still being productive and proactive in your area, that's what you need to do. So I'm, as a government guy, I think I'm actually for a little bit less of the regulatory, you must do this, as opposed to, if you want to do this, here are a couple options and ways of employing something. But whatever works best for your business model and your risk tolerance and those sorts of things, I think is really handing that back over to the individuals that actually need that guidance is important, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that I probably also share a similar view as John. Like the way that I look at this, of course, this is bad because that now we do not have an office that can help us make the regulation, also somehow more or less enforce the regulation. However, on the other hand, the way that I see it, it is a great opportunity of just press the reset button. So now that we know that there's no one's going to be responsible for making or enforcing this regulation, great. So who's going to make a regulation, or who's going to enforce the regulation, or maybe this is a good time for us to rethink about regulation. Maybe this is a great time for us to regenerate the regulation, given the past experience of some of those recommendations are not as great or as useful as expected. So this is the way that I look at it. It's a great reset button, and it's awesome that right now we actually have this valuable opportunity for someone to really stand out or figured out a more holistic and systematic way to look at risk. And in fact, that when people talk about risk, I think that risk is kind of like a buzzword right now. Everyone talks about that, but no one really knows what they're talking about. Because this is not because they really don't know what they're talking about. It's because different people have different definition. And people just, keep using the same word and think about, I thought that I know what you're talking about, but actually I don't know what you're talking about. So actually it's great that now we can really kind of like get to the rabbit hole and think about what is risk and what is the risk that you are talking about.
What's your definition?
That's a great question. I can only say my definition. Like I am a professor, I have a team, and my team mostly is to hack. Like we hack drones, we hack Ubuntu systems. We actually attend multiple times PON to on. So the risks that we see mostly is the cyber vulnerabilities that we discover, and also kind of pulling out this cyber. Like how does this really a vulnerability can affect the proper operation, of or the proper mission. So the way that I look at risk is tightly bounded with the mission. It doesn't mean that there's no risk. However, if this risk is not really relevant to the mission, this is probably something that you can dismiss so far, or like for now. So risk is dynamic. Risk is a function. Risk is not a variable.
You can jump in if you want. I was going to shift to, I like the idea of a great reset because my head goes to a little bit broader in the era of great power competition. And I start to think through how do we do reset? How do we do risk? And I start thinking about acquisition options. And I think about, wouldn't it be great if we could press reset with the acquisition core so we could think through what it looks like in this particular era. If most people don't know, and I'm going to assume, if you're a startup that's doing this kind of stuff with space domain awareness and working with either Space Force or NASA or something, like going through the acquisition process is a challenge. When you think about cybersecurity and anything that, if I say MMC2, you probably have a heart embolism, right? Like there's just a lot of things that are going on right now, and I think the opportunity for a great reset is upon us. Where while it may feel like the Wild West to some degree, the department, the administration is looking at, how do we figure out how to purchase software quickly? How do we do that in a compliant way? Because right now, the way the Department of Defense and others purchase things, it's a 5-year time horizon. Do you think it's realistic that you can purchase software thinking about what it's going to be in 5 years from now? It's not even plausible. And so, we're in this crazy environment where needs to be an Etch-a-Sketch shook pretty aggressively right now. But at the same time, how do we do that in a safe way? How do we do that in a compliant way? How do we do that so that we have those rails, but the system needs to be redesigned?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. I mean, there's so many resets across the government, different areas that we all work within, and working in the Pentagon and seeing all the different organizations that all touch cyber, but there's really not one main organization that's providing the strategic guidance of looking forward and trying to figure out what that looks like going into the even 5 years, let alone decades into the future. I think we're in the same position we were with space for a while, that to get budgetary support, do we have to carve all those cyber organizations out and create a cyber force? I don't know if that's the right answer. More bureaucracy is not necessarily the answer, but how do you get the right priority? How do you get the voice for this domain that really is integral to every other domain? Every service in our military relies on cyber systems to operate at the right level to really project any power outside our borders. It would all fall apart without a robust cyber network. So I think we've got to, essentially erase the board, the Etch-a-Sketch. I love that analogy. I'm going to try to use that in the future. But let's start over. Let's not be beholden to what's happened in the past. Let's get a fresh whiteboard, sketch it out. What does today forward look like? What's the right answer? And start there. And you may not be able to execute exactly what you come up with, but it would be a hell of a better start than where we're at now.
Yeah, I think that this is also, it's a great opportunity for us to think about the next step of being, say that after recognizing risk, right? So after the risk has been recognized, who's going to enforce it, or who's going to keep an eye looking at that, or prevent this risk becoming unexpected or probabilistic disaster tool than actual disaster. Then this goes to like risk protection or the incident response. Right now we have this great opportunity to re-look at this definition or re-look at this term in different domain, and then followed by that, we can think about how we should train people to handle those kind of a risk, and how we should train people to, to live with the risk. I mean, we all have risk. Humans all have risk, but we still become alive, right? There is a reason. That's because we are maintaining ourselves under the situation of risk. So similarly, it's like a system as well. So then the operators, then also, or the like cyber operators need to also understand how to operate properly given the fact of risk is existent.
I want to shift a little bit to Arizona parochial interests, right? So given Arizona's growing cybersecurity sector and the formation of the Cybersecurity Canyon, which includes some legacy projects like ACTRA and things like that, how can the local expertise be leveraged in unique challenges between space cybersecurity, and what opportunities exist for collaboration between Arizona-based companies and the federal agencies? Oh, go, Megan.
I was going to say, I was trying to give someone else the floor. So I think that what we're looking at in Arizona is sort of to touch on the prior two questions and topics. A lot of we typically do here, from my experience, and both in the private and public sector, especially when we're trying to work amongst the two, we end up in a scenario where reduced regulation is ideal, but reduced guidance is enhanced. And that's where I look at, from specifically in Arizona and a kind of a cyber basin scenario, we're looking at, we have a ton of opportunity, we have a ton of talent coming here, we have a ton of, even from when you look at like the Intels coming here, the TSMCs, you're going to end up with a scenario where you're going to have to address this from a new and pivotable standpoint at every turn. When it comes to how do we handle that in the best way possible, it seems to be the if you will, and I say this with all of the codifiers in the world around it, but what has been successful up to this point, and that I've seen us learn from other scenarios and then cut, paste, and redress in a way that works more functionally, is getting sector experts, right? Whether that's private or public, it's people who have entered this space newly in our new Gen Z individuals and engineers, as well as our long-standing tech experts who have seen this development. So not only are we able to look at that from I'm very in on this newest updated aspect of what's going on, but also those who have seen these problems come before, and letting that be the guiding scenario in which that most policy decision makers are using and basing their decisions off of. Right, that's where we come up with a lot of our Arizona cybersecurity team plans. It's a very collaborative group of education leaders, private sector leaders, public sector leaders, so that we can make sure that we're addressing, hey, there's going to be an objection from the defense industry from this. Hey, there's going to be an objection from the education industry because of this. Hey, there's an objection from the private sector industry because of this. Because to think that we could ever regulate, much to John's point and everyone's points prior, that a small business who's trying to do the right thing and doesn't want to be in some scenario where they end up becoming the liable party for someone else's bad deeds, and we all, I think we, at least in this room, can agree, your name, your address, and your social security are out there. We've made peace with that. How do we not terrify everyone, but also enhance the importance of security moving forward without saying, it's already happened, give up the goat. That's really what I've seen be the most effective, is when we really lean on the people that who know what they're talking about and ensure that the biggest avenue that we're opening up is that conversation between the leaders in the industry and the leaders in the policy decision making.
Yeah, I'll throw in from kind of the other side also. So the federal government does have a lot of opportunity, at least to work in smaller scales across what they would consider critical sectors. So the DHS has put out a list of different critical sectors. Space is not on that critical sector, which is an interesting discussion. And I was part of a panel, the Space ISAC, which if you are unfamiliar with ISACs, for any sector, you really should get into an ISAC. It's I always mess this up. I think it's an Information Sharing and Analysis Center is what ISAC stands for. The space one is ran by Aerospace out of Colorado, and they're fantastic people up there. But when it comes to sharing different security techniques or supporting each other, it really is a team effort. I think like cyber is known for being kind of that scary, nobody really wants to talk about it. It's a cost center. It's not any, and nobody has a good day when they're talking to a cyber person, right? It's a very reactive system, and nobody is actively going after trying to figure out how to keep themselves safe, or they don't want to talk about it until it's already happened. Something bad has already happened, right? And I think one of the things that especially the smaller companies can start doing is you've got ISACs that are interested in sharing information. You also have FBI has this InfraGard program, and there's a lot of different InfraGards in a lot of different areas where you can interact with the FBI specifically on helping to figure out what's happening at like a global scale in different campaigns for different actors, be able to protect yourself. They have a vested interest in keeping U.S. critical infrastructure safe, and so they help you. I'll say that I have found myself in a bunch of different really cool, fun places working with small companies, specifically because of InfraGard's style support, not necessarily FBI or DOJ, but that sort of support. So it really is a team effort. We like working together. There's been this historical hush-hushness about attacks, and people are afraid or embarrassed to admit that they've been. To use a hack term, because I usually am wearing a t-shirt and shorts when I'm on stage. It's really weird to have a jacket right now.
But you look great.
But I appreciate it. Thank you. This is like the extent of my dress clothes right now. That's why these shoes are like 10 years old and they still look new, because I rarely use them. But they, I totally lost my thought on that. The
InfraGard.
Right, yeah. So working together, people are very embarrassed. But at this point in time, everybody has been owned. Using the term, everybody has been owned. It's not new for anybody. And the only way we can battle this is to build these relationships, have conferences and discussions like we're having here, where we've got competitors maybe in the market, but we come together here for a fusion of just ideas and help and support to really push forward in this market and keep ourselves safe from, I mean, it's the US, right? Like all of us, no matter where we're from in this area, we really want space working, and it's really a team effort, so we should act like a team.
Yeah, I completely agree. Speaking of team, and competitors potentially coming together. So boil this down to really what matters, right, is increased funding, more revenue. And so given that Arizona has this cybersecurity ecosystem, what?
She's saying and money.
Yeah, well, that's what it boils down to. How do we get more of it? We want more federal funding in the state. We want more federal funding in institutions. So that's the question I'm going to ask. It's like, we have this burgeoning space economy. We have the cybersecurity background. We have a huge defense footprint in the state. How do we kind of come together more with the local companies, the state assets, the federal assets, academic institutions to collaborate to create a more robust ecosystem that is able to attract more funding, more private investment, more of those things?
I think we work together. Oh.
I was just going to say politicians like Justin are a big help. We
I know he's
connected
got to
at
be
the
the Capitol getting funding bills done right now.
We're sorry we haven't brought up your name in every answer, and I'll make sure that we rectify that, yes.
Well,
And
I mean,
Arizona's
Justin and I
contribution.
connected at the First Space Summit, where I scared the hell out of everyone because I said, China's about to take over our country and we're all doomed, and really depressed everyone before cocktails.
And he was right.
And I can't believe Jessica put me on stage again. So, I'm improving at least. But resiliency. There you go. All back to cyber.
Out of curiosity, in this room, I wonder how many of your organization can take classified projects? Okay, good. So we probably have like 1/3 or maybe 1/4 of you guys that can take classified project. So what I see in the past few years is that there are more and more DARPA programs specifically that ask for, being like classified or only U.S. citizens can carry it. And when I say only U.S., it's not about the entity. It's not about me, the PI. It is the students, like the actual people who get involved must be U.S. citizen or at least a U.S. person. I mean, this for a university, for a public university such as ASU, is actually give us a very high bar and bring us a lot of, burden, because as a public university, we cannot take over classified projects, period. This is the nature of the university. And then because of that, we cannot get ourselves involved in, highly creative projects. And this is exactly what we are strong at because, just like the last panel say, students, young people, right? So I know that someone or like some of the PMs, they're trying to advocate around and telling people that actually it's fine to work with universities, fine to make some, classified project. Actually, it's okay to make it unclassified. It doesn't have to be classified, or you just need to be smart to really carve it out, and that will really helpful. So I think that one like future direction or something that I hope someone can help for universities or for like more of the public sectors, such as the other 3/4 of us, is that make programs that are less classified and make it possible. And also we probably need also more people that they are good at translating from classified content to unclassified content so that we can have, the community to support them. I mean, for example, Linux, right? I mean, Linux is an open community. There are a lot of support on that. And of course, some of those classified facilities, they more or less use a variation of Linux, more or less, right? But it doesn't mean that they cannot get any support. Because there are people, they're talented, they know how to translate that. They can still get the support that they want. So I think this is also something that will be worth of us to pursue.
Yeah, the another area ripe for deregulation or at least streamlining is the classification process, declassification, just getting clearances for people. We as a nation, I think one of our strategic advantages is our academia, our free market economy that encourages innovative companies to do things, like Matt describes, try something. China, they can put a 50-year strategy. Their leadership can say this is where we're going. The entire country is going to mobilize behind that. But they miss out on some of those strengths that we have in the academic freedoms, in the free market economy. But we as a startup, it's tough to get clearances. The only reason I have mine is because I had it from my time in the military. It is an extremely difficult process, and I'd love to see some changes where even at the state level we can get assistance on getting people clearances. Maybe rethinking the academic side and being able to tap into those great, brilliant people that are doing wonderful things that can't be a part of what we need them to be a part of. And so I think it's almost like tying one hand behind your back because we have this great infrastructure, but we're not able to use it in the way that we really need to.
I'm saying, if I just adding on to that, that's where I look at it from both sides and to kind of tie it all together. When it comes to even really tying cybersecurity into the space aspect, I think it crosses both of those boundaries of making sure not only that we have more accessibility into the information, but also making sure that to the point of having those that can communicate from one, and I look at it as inherently different languages, whether it's the classified to the unclassified, right? Like same thing, I have mine from prior. If it would not have been that, it would have been a disaster to try to get that. We would all have been here 18 months and still nothing would have come of it. But at the same time, looking at it from bringing the conversation of cybersecurity and resilience, and we all hate the word, we all want to have a new word, but from cyber hygiene, from a cyber and IT space, which if we have an extra 2 hours, and I know that that's what everyone wants to do right now, me debating the difference between IT and cyber and trying to explain that to everyone as to why I cannot figure out how to work my email, but I can tell you you're using yours wrong. That's basically how that's how I do things, so that's great. Government, it's going well. But looking at it from making it part of the scenario, right? How many of us are in businesses and don't have a finance background, but the bottom line is something that's not kept out of the conversation, right? Looking at it from a revenue generation standpoint, or from a tax revenue standpoint, or from a smart taxing, fiscally responsible standpoint, those are not conversations that we keep people out of just because they aren't a business school MBA with a finance specialty. Those are conversations that we all are able to articulate. And there are levels of articulation and levels of specificity. Cyber should be in that same resiliency so that we can talk about it and say, hey, a lot of our attacks that we're going to get on a cybersecurity basis for space are going to be the ground-based systems. If we're not protecting the ground-based systems for cyber, we're also not protecting it for any part of the telecom system or any of the GPS system. So it doesn't matter if you're trying to use your GPS to get from here to down the street to figure out which house you're going to or where your Uber's at, but it's the same system that you're using if you're trying to figure out where you're at based on every other space entity that we have up there going on. They're going to go to the ground systems first. Those are where we need to talk about these things. But it's not because it's not a space thing. It's because it's an everything thing. And people have this fear of it where this room should be filled with people that don't do cyber every day, but still understand the importance and the business value, whether it be for a bottom line value or for an operational value of how we can make sure that we're communicating more effectively so that more people have a baseline understanding of what's going on and can be more responsible with it.
And Megan, to your point, if you're trying to disrupt our ability to launch assets into space, what's the cheapest way to do that? It's to attack the cyber systems. It's not launching an ASAT to take out a rocket that's already on its way to space. I mean, there's so many vulnerabilities there that it's scary, and you try to figure out messaging to the public, how far you can really go without causing exactly. So
teed it up perfectly for Dr. Bao. But I'm just going to pause for a second and recognize that I understand, Megan. I'm using my email wrong. Roger that.
And we keep having to go over it. It's a problem.
Dr. Bao, how can we better leverage AI and machine learning to enhance threat detection and response to space systems while mitigating the risk of AI-powered attacks?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The reason why I say this is good because I am involved in the AIXCC game. I don't know how many of you have heard about. This is DARPA's competition that are leveraging, AI and maybe more specific LLM techniques for vulnerability research. It is a competition, and ASU managed to get in the final. It will be the final this year will be in DEF CON, so hopefully that we can get a great result. On the other hand, as I mentioned, I just came back from a DARPA program, and in this DARPA program, we have performers that are heavily using LLM techniques for some of those vulnerability research related questions, and a question that many people will have for this performer is that how are you going to justify that those results that are generated by LLM is correct? Who is going to verify that, and how are you going to verify that? And guess those questions that are raised up from the community already answer the questions that Drew just asked me, right? So I think the problem here is that great, LLM generate a lot of information for us, but if you just consider LLM as a, say, 8-year-old boy, how much that you think that you can trust them, right? They can tell that, hey, my sister cried because she wants to play with me, or she just wants ice cream, but in fact, it's just that he wants the ice cream. It happens. So then it turns out that then the verifying process could be actually more exhausted or requires more effort and workload for humans rather than just go there and get the answer by themselves, right? There are a lot of, I think, interesting research solutions based on that, right? For example, if someone use LM to get an answer, then can we come up with a quick unit test to verify this answer without having users to go into that, or the explainable AI, which is something that DoD has been pursuing, looking for solutions for years, if not decades. I think those are all good directions that we should look into and continue to look into, especially given the better and better performance coming up from AI. And also another thing is, I think, is the scope, what tasks we should assign to AI. Maybe this is also come back to the risk problem, right? Okay, now that we know that AI generates the solution, what is the risk? How that risk can be propagated into the final missions.
I'll take ice cream, Drew. I just want that on the record. So I want ice cream.
I thought this was a window into my house because my 8-year-old son and my 3-year-old daughter get into internecine warfare all day over ice cream. So
I wanted to hop onto there also because so a lot of the work that I get the opportunity to do is in the AI and large language model and how adversaries are using them, which is super interesting. And even in the open source intelligence, read unclassified. You can go Google this stuff, find the reporting for all of this. We've seen adversaries that are utilizing AI and large language models that they're filling up and building out automated attacks. Not again, I don't want to like fearmonger here, but it's happening. I think I read a report where there was a attributed Chinese actor that had, or China-based actor that had taken, I think it was like 100 terabytes worth of data from multiple companies. That we would assume all they're doing, because I'm not going to read 100. I don't know if you know how big a terabyte is. I'm not sure my audience right now, but it's like it's quite a few zip drives, quite a few of them, which is also my age. But they're taking these and processing. The idea is that they're taking all of this, processing it into an element. And I actually was talking with Z about this before the conversation. You can wake up, Z. It's fine. We were talking about how like they're utilizing this for not just attacks and understanding what infrastructure could be susceptible now and poor resilience measures now for systems, but the same tactics that they're using for things like quantum cryptography, where they're doing what they call store and decrypt, storing a bunch of data, all of that data that you're doing really good cyber hygiene things and encrypting it right now, so nobody will ever be able to read it. They'll read it as soon as they can crack it in the future with these quantum things. So it's super important, I think, to also understand my definition of risk is the threat plus the opportunity plus the vulnerability. Like, so what is out there, who actually wants to take it, and how can they get it from you? And so I think it's really awesome to be able to share things back and forth, but I think companies should take some responsibility with what they're actually putting out there. Maybe not bragging about the very specific parts and models that you're putting into your systems when they get out there, or bragging about selling your models to different companies that are supporting national security systems or critical infrastructure, because that stuff can be mined and researched and reutilized in the future. Yeah.
Yep, awesome. We have time probably for one more question up here. So I want you guys to put your thinking caps on. So one of you will get a chance to ask a question, and I want it to be something that can stump the entire panel up here. Okay. Okay. So for the last question, we're going to go to the current administration bingo card and bring up tariffs. And so I'm just curious, as you have all these tariffs and that crazy ebb and flowing that happens. This is for the whole panel, just so you know.
Are we sure that they don't have more than one question just before we get to this?
And the shifting geopolitical alliances that we have, how is international cooperation, in regard to space cyber resilience, how is that impacting kind of like the worldview as we see it right now in terms of this is a shared asset for space? So like how is our geopolitical, upheaval right now going to position us in the near future, the coming years?
This is actually not a joke. What do you mean by shared asset?
Space. So
No.
What we're here for.
Oh, you're trying to stump me now?
No, I just want to make sure that I answer the question that was asked. But space gave it got it. Shockingly, Drew and I met each other before this, and this is exactly how it always goes. So the way it's changed based on everything that's going on, when if we're separating the specifics and looking at the overall picture, I think that it needs to be a strengthening and an adamant effort to really inform everyone at home, so that it can be, let's not to be a protectionist or anything in that aspect, but when you look at it, again, my background being in security, I probably have a more risk-adverse advice than most, but at the same time, looking at it from we need to make sure that our institutions are not only secured, but that we're making very sure that the shareable features of it are better monitored than they currently are, right? So the standpoint of looking at who we're sharing stuff with, what we're sharing who with, and to be that always fun security awareness training on repeat, who has access to what and what is automated and what is not at an individual and a national basis at every entity. Who can have access to what are the permissions in which those things happen, and making sure that I'm all for deregulating so that things can innovate, but making sure that it's done in a smart way with eyes on it from someone who knows the industry and the institutional risk, and then looking at it and saying, hey, how can we make sure that we're protecting ourselves amid whatever ends up coming, not only today, tomorrow, but in the next 4 years, 5 years. 4 was a strange number. It sounded more political than I meant it. I apologize.
We've got a great network of partners and allies, and something that's always been brought up in some of our whether it's bilateral, multilateral discussions is the difficulty in sharing information. And I'm all for true partnerships where both sides benefit, both sides contribute, and everyone comes out ahead. And figuring out, what other nations, what they're really good at, what they can bring to the table, not just duplicating things that are already being done on our side, and figuring out what that relationship looks like, but really breaking down the barriers too on the sharing of information. I think, coming across those, hitting your head against the wall multiple times, just trying to get the most basic information through, because we were beholden to a standard that was applied to everything instead of smartly applied to scenarios as it should be. So kind of, again, Drew, to your point, the Etch-a-Sketch again, let's rethink that as well, and how we share information, how we bring partners to the table, what that relationship looks like, so that both sides are satisfied with where that goes. So.
I just want to add one thing real quick. I think that as academia, sometimes we're the highest stream, means that we generate information, and sometimes we're the endest stream, which is like we're probably the last people in this table gonna get this information. So I cannot really control who's gonna share information with us. However, since we are also part of the information generator, what we are doing is we open source our stuff. We open source our research, we open source the data, while under the control, as long as IRB allows so, we try to make sure that our research, or we're trying to make sure that we are doing open science as much as we can, so that we can benefit small companies who like to try our ideas, or government who's like to found those continuation of transitioning of those research.
For sure. We have time for a question from the audience, but I guess I would just share a story real quick at the very end, which nearly caused an international incident when I was in the White House. And it started off as a joke, and I started taking it a little bit more seriously. But I was like, hey, our flag's on the moon. Why can't we make this a national park? I was like, we claimed it. We're there first. Our flag's there. And then and so it turns out, if you guys know Scott Pace, and the White House counsel kicked in my door, and they're like, do you understand that's 5 separate international treaties that you're violating if you're going to do this? I was like, it's finders keepers. So we got there first. Anyway, it didn't go very far. So anyway, I'll turn it over to the audience for a question if anybody has one. Hit it. Over time. We had 20 seconds. Come on, hit it.
Thought experiment, just because I'm the youngest, so I want to see how crazy you can get with it. Specifically, Colonel Chandler, I know that we have discussions about cyber attacks on unmanned systems in space. What kind of scenarios can you imagine for a cyber attack on manned systems?
Well,
critical infrastructure, everything collapses.
I mean, loss of human life. I mean, anything that attacks that, to me, that's a red line that would precipitate conflict on Earth. A lot of the other things are almost out of sight, out of mind, those effects. The public doesn't see if there's not loss of life, even if it could be critical infrastructure like GPS. I don't know if we'd go to war over that. But if there was a cyber attack resulted in the loss of human life and it was directly attributable to that, I could see that crossing a red line and potentially starting.
Can I call it? You can talk afterwards, because I think we need.
All right, we got to go. Sorry, everybody.
Yes, sir. The general outranks me, so yes.